So we had finished the three types of what kind of yajnas, the rituals, the anushtans, and other things. There are these where you do these religious rituals just because one should do it for purification of one's mind. That is sattvika. When you do following all the rules and regulation, expecting certain returns, which is also fine, that is rajasika. And you don't follow any rules, and you do it without following any, without having any liking, any shraddha and respect for what you are doing, and you are not even fulfilling the minimum requirements of, say, feeding poor people or giving some dakshina or whatever tips to anybody who has helped you with this dakshina or whatever your donation you're supposed to make. That is a very tamasika thing. So that is shraddha virahitam yagyam tamasam parichatsyase. Now he's going to tell us and explain to us yajna, tapa, dana. So now we'll talk about tapas. Even tapasya, which is a kind of exertion of your energy to purify your whole system and elevate your consciousness to a higher level. Generally, these are purificatory practices. Maybe somebody wants to do that for higher level of concentration, or maybe because he wants to get rid of any past trauma or any kind of negativity which is apparently chasing him and affecting his activities. So you can do these tapasyas. But depending on why you want to do it, that tapasya will be sattvika or rajasika or tamashika. Before you go into the details, I just want to summarize it so that you know in advance. If you are doing it purely with good intentions, without expecting any returns, for enhancing a spiritual practice and focusing your attention on the divinity, that is sattvika. If you are doing it to show off or for certain results, the way you do some yajnas, that tapasya, that kind of anusthana, that kind of spiritual austerity which you are practicing, that will be called rajasika. If you are doing it with ill intentions of getting some power so that you can harm someone, if you want to hurt somebody with these occult powers you want to develop by doing few days of zapas and tapas or whatever, that is tamasika tapas. So this is in summary before we go to the three, and after that we will also look at the three kinds of yeah. So these tapas, let's look at it. We will try to do so. Before we go into three kinds of tapas, it's also important to understand that the tapas per se can be practiced at the level of our physical being. So that is sararika tapas. So, like for example, you're sitting in asana, you get up early morning, you take a bath, that is sararika tapas. Then you sort of observe certain discipline while communicating with others. You are not hurtful, you don't say anything harsh, you do not cause any trauma and anxiety in another person. That moderation or temperance or self imposed restraint is called vachika tapas. That is also some kind of an austerity. That also gives you that these tapas we do because we want to enhance our willpower. Whenever we exercise control, as they say in this these management gurus, you are a master of all that you have not said, and you are a slave of all that you have said, because you are bound up with whatever you have stated, and people will quote you, you had said this earlier. So you are a master of whatever you haven't said because you retain your freedom. And finally, that manasika is when you sort of mentally you do not entertain evil thoughts about others, and certain disciplines regarding your subjectivity, regarding your the way you sort of employ your mental faculties to deal with different things. If you observe self-imposed restraint there, that will become manashika tapas. So tapas is of three kinds: the physical or bodily, then vachika, verbal or communicative, and finally is subjective. Now, these tapas, again, if you divide that, if it is done for the heck of it, in order to enhance your spiritual willpower, that is sattvika. If it's done because by doing this, You have read in books, you're going to get some returns, that is Rajasika tapas. And if you are doing this discipline, Sararika, Vachika, and Manasika, because you want to develop occult powers and willpower to hurt somebody, that is Tamasika tapas. Now, there is one indication before we go into the slokas. I just want to make it very easy and simple that a person who appears as a tapasvi, you would not know whether he's sattvika or rajasika or tamasika tapasvi until and unless you are in a position to sort of figure out why he's doing this. If in his behavior you find he's a very greedy person, he is very willful, he is very ambitious, it's quite possible that he is doing rajasika tapas. And if he's a vairagi, he doesn't want anything, he's just doing it without any sankalpa, all these things, then he's a sattvika tapasvi. So the asuras in the earlier days, in the mythologies that we read, they were capable of high degree of tapasya, like Ravana did a lot of tapasya. But that was tamasic. He wanted to defeat the gods and angels and torture anyone and be most powerful. Maybe he was a mixture of rajasic and tamasic. So apparent observation of any kind of self-restraint per se doesn't make us either spiritual or dynamic or rajasic or materialistic or achievement oriented or negatively oriented or tamasic or deluded or foolish. It's all about what is behind what we are doing. If behind our spiritual practice there is good intention, there is surrender to God, there is no craving, that is perfect. If there is expectation of some returns, that is fine, but that is, he will explain, the results are not very sustainable and they have bondage coming with them. Any work we do with expectation has a tag, there's a price tag, and that is bondage. We have to enjoy the good and bad results of that particular observation. And finally, if you're doing it with evil intentions, we have mostly bad results, not enough visible results, good results, but mostly bad results. Drishta and adrishta, both the phalas. Drishta, why? Because you're doing bad things, you're hurting yourself, you're undergoing a lot of pain, you're hurting yourself anyway physically. That is your bad result physically. And drishta phala, drishta kufala, because you are not enjoying it, you don't like it also. You're doing it for some sort of a avisandhi you want to fulfill. And then because you're doing papa by mentally planning some violence or to hurt somebody or to control somebody, to mislead or manipulate or hypnotize somebody with your occult power, you are also earning a lot of papa phala. And you have to pay the price, either this life or in the next life. So this is about the 6 verses that we'll cover. That is the summary of it. The rest of it is very easy to follow. Krama praptasya tapasah satvikadi bhedam kathaitum sarira vachika manasa bhedena tasya traividyam aha trivihi. So the first 3 slokas, Madhusana Saraswati is introducing these first 3 slokas. He's saying in order to explain that the tapas can be of sattvika or rajasika or tamasika types, first he is explaining that tapas as such is of 3 types, which is bodily exertion of discipline, or you have vachika or communicative self-restraint, or you have manasika or mental or subjective self-restraint, right? Now, let's look at what is that physical self-discipline or self-restraint, which is tapasya, sararika tapas. Devadvija guru pragya pujanam sauchamarjavam brahmacharya mahingsa cha sariram tapa uchyate. So the first half or first 3/4 of this particular verse is about what is tapas. And then there is that definition, that lakya thing. This is called sararika sariram tapa uchyate. What is that? There is a pujanam. You want to worship, some kind of restraint. And it's very interesting, he's saying, because you have to compromise your ego, you have to sort of be humble and display your humility. So this pujanam, devata pujanam. So earlier we have done that upasana, but why is it he mentioned it again? Because this involves some discipline. You have to abide by some rules and regulations to do deva pujanam. So devadadi pujanam. So like you do a Vishnu Sahasranama or you read you read Lingastakams or any kind of stotras and do some pujas in the morning or at any point of time. That is Deva Pujanam. Then Dvija. Now, Dvija would here mean maybe, being respectful towards Brahmins, but in our social context, we have to reinterpret this. Dvija here would mean somebody who is refined enough, somebody who is a respectable citizen. So imagine you're traveling and you come across a person who is a very esteemed, respectable doctor, or he's a professor, or he's a charity worker, right? So you should be respectful towards him because he has sacrificed a lot of his, self-interest for society at large. So for me, I would say that is who is Dvija because he has a certain resolution to contribute something to society. He's a respectable person. Then Guru. Guru is somebody who has taught you, your professor, your acharya. It could be actually for us to begin with, who is the first Guru in our lives? It's our parents. So it's also Guru Pujanam, somebody who's respectfully dealing with his parents. Then Pragya Pujanam. Pragya would mean somebody who has pragya. So somebody who is very wise and intuitive, a man of letters. So maybe could be a writer or a journalist or a poet. And earlier days, they used to say that the king is worshipped in his own country, but the poet is worshipped across borders. We got to respect them. That is also, this is Sahararika Tapasya, is the saying. Saucham, cleanliness. Take a bath and wear clean clothes and sleep on a clean bed. All these are Saucham. And Arjavam. Arjavam means akutilata, not being twisted in the way you deal with it. So you be a little straightforward, and it could be also mental, but here we're talking about the physical aspect. Therefore, we will not get into the moral rectitude. That will come later on, but here, you're just being straightforward. Brahmacharyam. Now, Brahmacharyam, what does that mean? He will explain Brahmacharyam is, you are not establishing conjugal relationship in violation of the Dharma Shastras. So having conjugal relationship with one's wife as per the rules is perfect. That's not a problem. That is considered part of celibacy. That's not a problem. When that particular code of conduct is violated and somebody is doing it for pleasure or for craving, and he's kind of cheating his wife or she's cheating her husband and trying to establish it outside of what is a moral contract he has established with anyone, that is what is brahmacharya hani or brahmacharya rahityam. Observe the rules, not a problem. And ahimsa, as we have discussed earlier, in some of the Vedic rituals, there is a reference to animal sacrifices. Obviously, that's violence. But he's saying that you should not practice any violence anywhere, except where there is a most unavoidable requirement, as in case of a sacrifice or a ritualistic sacrifice. With certain other places, that's one of the reasons why you had Sankhya Darsana and Bodha Darsana coming up, because that also gives you papa if you do those. So it's much better to focus on extremely sattvic Vedic rituals where there is no sacrifice, and you can actually replace animal sacrifice with symbolic sacrifices, as we discussed earlier, that if you are doing a sattvika yajnas. So what happens today when you're doing Chandi Saptasati, Chandi Puja, or you're doing any kind of agamas, they don't do animal sacrifices. So if you have, that lentil, that urad ka dal, you use that gram and they make a small bada kind of thing, or you use a banana, you use a water gourd or something. So you're doing a symbolic sacrifice. You're not terminating anybody's life as such. So you can do this kind of pratinidhi, prayoga, because you are not doing with a sakama puja. You are doing it symbolically. You are doing it because it should be done. Then you can actually get rid of the all kinds of violence in case that is there. There's a requirement of animal sacrifice. You can do it by using symbolic sacrifices as a substitute. Ahimsa. So sariram tapaha. So these are physical self-restraint, practice of self-interest are tapasyas, austerities. Deva, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Surya, Agni, Durga, Dayaha. So these are the devatas, but Durga Adayaha. Adi means you can include anybody of your choice, anybody you love. Dvijaha, Dvijottamaha Brahmanaha. That is what Madhusudana Saraswati is writing, where you can interpret to as per your taste. So you could be a Vaishnava sannyasi, you could be a very educated person, or somebody whom you respect, or maybe as I mentioned, somebody who has chosen to live a life of sacrifice and is enlightened and stuff like that. Perhaps you could call him a Dvisha, somebody who is very refined. And then Guravaha, who are this Guru? Pitru, Matru, Acharya Dayaha. So father, mother, and Acharyas, the people who have taught us, our school teachers, our Acharyas, whosoever. Pragyaha, and who are these people? Panditaha. So, how is the Pandita word, where from it comes? So, there's a bit of discussion. There's a word called Panda. Okay, Vedo Jwala Tattva Vishani Va Buddhihi. So, Panda means actually wisdom, some sort of intellectual sharpness. Okay, so you have that Panda title in Eastern India or Pandey title in Northern India. So, Vedo Jwala Tattva Vishani Va Buddhihi. When a person's wisdom is kind of focused on the intricate details of the Vedas, and that particular wisdom that he has, Sa Sanjata Asya. A person has that Panda, and therefore he's called Pandita. How does it happen? There is a suffix called Panda plus Itach. So, Tad Asya Sanjatam Tarakadibhyaha Itach. So, there is a Paniniya Sutra 5 to 36. That is how the Pandita Sabda, that Itach, Panda Itach, and that is how it happens. Okay. And then, yeah, so the Pandita Pujanam, that Pragyaha, that is, and then Tesham Pujanam, Pranama Susrusadi Jathasastram. What is Pujanam? That you do a pranam when you see them. Doesn't mean you're sitting and doing, Panchopachara Pujanam or anything. You show them respect when you see them, and Susrusa. Give them an ear. Be careful be attentive while you're listening to them. Take orders when they need some help. That's what it is meant here. Saucham mrijalavhyam sarira shodhanam. So earlier people didn't have these liquid soap and soap or anything else, or shampoo or stuff like that. They were using different kind of natural elements like clay and water. With that, they used to wash their bodies. So you have this multani mitti. Even now, people use it to improve the quality of their skin, and there are specific clay which is also there with which you can wash your hair, and there's specific herbal you have sikakai or you have amla and you have different other herbal producers with which you can clean your hair and body and stuff like that. So mrujalavyam sariro shodhanam, essentially taking a good bath, because this text anyway is written in a hot country, in a country with temperate climate. Sorry, with a a country which is generally very hot and humid 7-8 months in a year. So obviously you have to take a good bath to remain healthy. Arjavam or Kautilyam. So you are not twisted, you are straightforward. Bhava Sangsudhi Sabdene Manase Tapasi Vakshati. Earlier in the later verse, that Bhava Sangsudhi will come. How to keep your mind very straightforward. That means not being over sophisticated, not trying to be smart or manipulative. That's what is here. Now, earlier, if you look at the 16th chapter, Bhagavan did talk about Daivi Sampat and Asuri Sampat. There was a mention of Sattva Sangshuddhi in the first verse of the 16th chapter. In a certain way, it has a backward reference to that. Bhava Sangshuddhi Sabdena. And he's saying that later on, that word will come, Bhava Sangshuddhi Sabdena, Manase Tapasi Vakshate. That will come. Just after the verse number 16 that we're going to read, this particular Bhava Sangshuddhi Sabda will come. Bihita Pratisiddhayor Eka Rupa Prabhriti Nibriti Salitvam. That is Sariram to Arjavam. What is that Arjavam? He's saying there is Brihita and Pratisiddha. There are certain actions which are prohibited in the spiritual texts. And then there are certain actions or certain activities which are provided for, which are approved, which are advised. So, without any complication, the people who sort of abide by whatever advice is given, like you should wake up in the morning, take a bath, do some prayers, should behave in a nice manner with your elders, and be kind and compassionate to your wife, your family members, and outsiders. These are whatever Shastra Vihita Karma, that is Arjavam, that is what is mentioned. Prabriti Nibriti, avoid what is prohibited and do what is advised. That is Arjavam. Brahmacharyam, Nisiddha Maithuna Nibriti. So, whatever Nisiddha Maithuna, which is prohibited conjugal relationship, and you are withdrawing from that, you're staying away from that. That is brahmacharya. Doesn't mean you are not a monk, you are in samsara and you have a right to conjugal happiness, but then is permitted by the moral code of conduct. Ahimsa, what is that? Asastriya prani pidana abhavaha. Because prani pidana, animal sacrifices, could be there at certain certain instances while you're doing the Vedic rituals. And therefore, there is a mention that you should not unnecessarily kill anyone, never for eating its meat. It's only for certain spiritual, religious purposes. You should also avoid that ritual. But then, if you want to do it, then that animal sacrifice, they mention that it will go to heaven. So you're, even though you are committing violence, you are benefiting the animal. That is the argument. But then I mean, you could, like Buddhists and Sankhyas, you could altogether drop any interest or curiosity about the rituals where violence is required to be performed in any form. Chakarat asteya aparigrahu api. Now, cha, there is a mention, brahmacharyam ahimsa cha. Also, what does that mean? He's saying, why don't you include two more things? Asteya, you should not pick up anything that will be theft without informing somebody, even if it is your wife or husband, your father or mother, either she or he has a pen or a cell phone, you pick it up and go. That is asteya, that is theft. You should take permission. You should inform the person, whosoever it belongs to. You inform the person, or then you take it with permission. That's not a problem. But picking up anything without anyone's information or explicit permission is theft, stheya, and therefore not doing is astheya. Aparigraho api. And what is aparigraha? Not trying to receive any gifts from anybody, but don't be cruel or rude to anyone. Somebody is giving a birthday gift, that's all fine. But here, receiving anything more than what you require, if, like for example, somebody says, you are helping somebody, and he comes back and gives you a thank you message, a card, or maybe gives you a pen or something out of love, that's perhaps fine. But then if you're receiving bribe or gifts, that's not good. That is that particular thing. And even receiving gifts from strangers, people who may have purchased this with ill-gotten money is going to affect our spiritual sadhana, they say. So one has to be very, very discreet about these things. Sariram, sarira pradhanehi karmadhivi sadhyam, na tu kevalena sarirena. So sariram tapaha, it says, what does it mean? The body cannot do any austerities. There has to be an agency, which is us. So the tapasya has to be done by the karta, which is our subjective self, who has viveka vijnana and other things. But then the self-restraint or self-control in regard to moderating the movement and the way we sort of engineer the motor activities of our body, that will become sararika tapas. That is what is self-restraint in physical terms. But doesn't mean the body can do it. It requires that agency, which is us. That is how it comes to an end. Now let's go for what is vachika tapasya. What is that discipline with regard to communication? So the communicative ethics, as they say in some people, there's this great German philosopher called Habermas, who has written a lot of books on these communicative ethics. Now we need to have in the moral universe of communication or conversation, there are rules of communication. And here he's saying that we need to have an ethical domain according to which we need to communicate. And that is the moderation that we should aspire for. That means that even if you may be very wise, even though you don't consume anything which is bad, but you are very rude, then actually a spiritual sadhana is not going to be called successful and may not give you the desired results. So therefore, anudvegakaram vakyam satyam priyahitam chayat swadhyayabhyasanam chaiva vangmayam tapa uchyate. And it's very straightforward. First thing is that when we speak, it should not create any trauma or anxiety or fear or deprivation in the person who is listening to it. So sometimes parents, without knowing, shout at their children, mostly in India. They think it's their right to be cruel or rude to their children. The teachers are sometimes rude to the students, and in the workplace, the bosses, the powerful guys, are sometimes disrespectful towards their subordinates. But he's saying that if you want to do vachika tapas, then it's very important that we keep in our minds that whatever we speak, whatever we communicate, should not create any udvega, should not create any kind of restlessness, anxiety, any strain or stress in the person who is receiving it. That vakyam. So we have to be very careful about what we speak. Satyam. Then if we mislead, we don't hurt, but we say something which is completely false, then he's not anxious, but he nurtures the false belief of, he's if somebody already has a disease. He says, "Do you think I have this?" And the best advice is, okay, you have to go for the checkups and you have to figure out, no, no, nothing has happened to you. Report at office tomorrow. What actually if he has that disease? He's going to infect others. Or if it's not a infectious disease, it's quite possible that he is going closer to being, you know, adversely affected by the consequence of whatever infection he's suffering from. So Vakyam, then so therefore it has to be Satyam. But then would you like to tell a truth which might put somebody in danger, as we keep discussing? If there's a very tense social situation, if there's a little girl who runs to your house and is seeking shelter, and then other people knock at your door and saying, "Did you see any girl coming this way?" Are you going to say, "Yes, there's a girl who just came to my house. You can take her"? You know what's going to happen to her. So you're supposed to lie. Lie? No, that is the truth. You're saving a life. You're saving the dignity of a woman or a girl. So he's saying that has to be priya hitam. So it should be sweet. It should be kalyanakari. It should be beneficial. We cannot take pride in telling a truth which causes anger or hatred or pain or anxiety or sort of disturbs somebody. It's quite possible that somebody is, like, for example, I've seen that a lot of people deliberately remind a person they're talking to of his past trauma or some failure or childhood problems or his student life stories, because he's very successful. You want to hurt him or her. You say, "You remember when we were in a hostel and you were blah blah blah." Why are you saying this? You're just jealous, aren't you? And you want to say this to that other person because you want to hurt him. Or there's a girl who is happily married and she had a breakup and she was down with depression for a few months or years, and then you're just feeling a little jealous or something, and you say, "I'm so happy to see you smile. I remember those days when you didn't report to anyone, you won't pick up the phone and then go off. You remember? We used to go and I used to walk with you in the garden and you used to sob all the time." What is the purpose of saying this? It's just plain, I mean, it's just being extremely negative. You are not being able to tolerate somebody's smile and happiness. So it should be priya, it should be hitakari. Okay, Jayat. Then Swadhyaya, and this is also we are talking about Vachika. So recitation and chanting of the mantras or Bhagavad Gita or reading something aloud. Then you are listening and others are also listening. So that is Swadhyayam. And Abhyasanam cha eva, and all kinds of spiritual abhyasas, especially those who certain, like some people do Rudra chanting or Siva Mahimna stotras or Shanti mantras and whatever, those abhyasas, especially if he's a student of the Vedic literature, he's a traditional Sanskrit scholar or something. Chaiva Vangmayam Tapa Uchyate. All these are Vachika Tapasya. And it's very wise to remember all that. Anudvegakaram, what does that mean? Na kasyachit dukkhakaram. Shouldn't hurt anyone, shouldn't cause pain in any person. Satyam, pramana moolam avaditartam. First thing, it should be avadita. So you shouldn't say something which can be refuted easily. There's this English philosopher called Karl Popper, and he brought in an argument called falsifiability thesis. If you are making a truth proposition, he says first we got to figure out whether it's falsifiable. If somebody is making a statement which cannot be challenged, then that's not a truth statement, so we shouldn't argue with it. That's, I mean, he's a positivist person, so he says that. Now, what you are discussing here is avadidartham. So it's quite possible that you say something which can be refuted with a counter argument or some other pramana. So it should not be refutable. That is truth. Number two, that it should be pramana moolam. It should be based on some epistemological evidence in the sense. So you will say that, okay, it's an empirical fact. I have verified it through observation. Pratyakya pramanata or logical deductions or sabda pramana. You can refer to the Shruti Vakyas as some Sastriya textual authority. You quote and say, this is what is written here. I'm not lying to you. Okay, that is Satyam. Then, in addition, even if that is Satya, there should be something else with it. What is Priyam? Just imagine in astrology, or there is a particular statement about a person who has done something wrong, and he says that he's going to go to hell and he will do this and that and that. And that fellow by mistake has committed that error and comes to you for advice. What do I do? I have done this. Are you supposed to quote that text and say, now you're going to go to hell and you are responsible for this and blah, blah, blah? No, that's not the way we are going to talk to that fellow. You're saying, yeah, okay, it has happened. I'll look into the literature and find out if a person has done this, what are the prayaschitas, what are the penitential actions that he can undertake in order to overcome the negative consequences thereof. That's a good brotherly, that's a spiritual advice the other fellow is looking for. So I was listening to one of these guys, I think he has passed away recently. He said something very beautiful. He said, if a person has cancer and you are a doctor and you're a psychologist or a counselor, and she walks in and you say, yeah, so you have cancer. Remember, you used to smoke and drink a lot. So now, you are responsible for what you have. And you say that can be devastating for the person who is listening to it. You rather tell that now you have this condition, you got to respond to it. You are creating a positive agency in that person. Instead of saying, okay, so your marriage broke. Yeah, I mean, I was always telling you, you are going to mess it up. I mean, you are responsible for it. Didn't you behave badly with your wife, who's otherwise a very sweet lady? There's no point talking like that. It's your friend who has come to you for some help, some love, some sympathy. And you're saying I mean, he knows it. He doesn't need you to hurt him again. So what he mentions, it has to be priyam. The word should be loving. It should carry some warmth. It should be like a balm that you apply it on the person who listens to it and he benefits from it. But because of our habits, we have a habit that we are very truthful. Actually, what we don't say is that by referring to ourselves as truthful, we are essentially saying we are rude, sadistic people who don't mind hurting somebody in the name of truth. And that is the basic truth that we need to accept about ourselves. And therefore, he's saying it has to be priyam. Srotuhu tatkala sruti sukham. The person who is listening to it should feel a little good. So even if you can motivate a little, it's quite possible that a person has come to you and that's a genuine problem, you cannot solve it. But to start with, you have to bring in that element of loving kindness. Then that fellow will trust you. If you mess it up, the little help that fellow was seeking and he could open up before you, you could know what's going on in that person. Now that door will be closed. So it's very important to sort of remain open and warm to the person who has come to us for some help, especially because we are reading Bhagavad Gita, something a lot of people sort of seek help. But the challenge is that we don't have all the skills. But this particular verse gives us certain keys with which, even though we are not highly skillful in counseling, we can practice the basic minimum warmth which is required in everyday conversation so that the person who is listening to us doesn't go back in tears. That is very important. So satyam and priyam. And then what? Hitam cha yata. And then that should help. But if you tell a lie, and if a person is not actually very well dressed and she's going to a party, and then she asks you, how do I look? And you say, oh, look like a princess. Actually, if you were a genuine friend, you could say that, no, I think you could change this particular dress. It doesn't look that good. Why don't you have something else? You're not hurting anyone. You're just saying, do you have something else? Why not this one? Instead of saying this is a funny dress, you're going to be a laughing stock, you could just say anything else. Yeah, this looks much better. Don't you like it? Maybe she wears it and she feels good. At that moment, she was making a wrong choice, maybe. You don't have to that you have heard that old song that you look wonderful. No, you shouldn't say that. So it has to be in her interest or in his interest, whosoever is listening to you. So we have 4 5 things. First thing, anudvega karam. We should not create anxiety. We should tell the truth, but that should be sweet and warm and friendly and loving. But by being friendly and loving, we should not mislead anyone. It should help or benefit that person. Then swadhyaya and abhyasanam, which is self-regarding. These are other regarding. John Stuart Mill kept saying there are 2 sets of actions, which are other regarding, which is regarding others, and about yourself. This swadhyaya and abhyasana is about yourself, and that also you kind of use your your ability to speak, and therefore these are certain self-regarding tapasyas that we are supposed to do. So he's saying, okay, chakara visheshananam samuchayartha anudvega karatwadi visheshana chatushtena visishtam not to ekena api visheshanana nyunam. He's saying when you're doing tapasya, you cannot say that I've told the truth and therefore I can create udvega, I can hurt somebody because I've told the truth. No. He's saying you have to, if you take all 4 adjectives of your communication, if all 4 are present, then only it can be called tapasya, not by taking up one of the criteria. Oh, that's not going to help. That is just making it very obvious. We try to perfect and address this advice in a more comprehensive manner. Yad vakyam yatha santo bhavavassa swadhyayam yogam cha anushtita. Somebody is very disturbed, and this boy comes to you. What happened? No, I did this and this thing. Okay, fine, not a problem. Why didn't you cool down? You want to have a glass of water? Then he's saying, okay, so let's together do this swadhyaya. He's saying how a particular father will address it. The boy has come back from a meeting of Sanskrit scholars and he's feeling depressed because people laughed at him. He couldn't perhaps remember some slokas. He's saying, fine. So what happened? No, I had gone and they laughed at me. It's fine, not a problem. Which chapter was this? You were chanting this one. Okay, let's together chant it. Just imagine he's sitting with his son or his student to chant that particular chapter. So he's anyway trying to correct him, but he's participating in it. That is the process of active love. So somebody has failed. Instead of preaching, if we join them and do that with them, what happened? I mean, somebody is trying to do something or writing a report. What is it? Let me look at it. We just check it. Now you are a very active, hands-on supervisor, and such supervisors, such guides, and such people or managers are loved by their subordinates because they give them active learning opportunities. So swadhyayam yogam cha anushtita. Let's do it. Let's do that. Tatha te shreyo bhavishyati ityadi tad vangmayam vachikam tapah sariravat. So he's saying like you have the sariram tapah. This one is vangmayam tapah. So what is this vangmaya tapah? He's explaining that you sit and you do that, and whatever is in your interest, what is shreya, you should follow it. You give proper advice. Then swadhyaya abhyasanam cha, then studying the text and doing abhyasa and practice. So jatha vidhi veda abhyasascha vangmayam tapah uchyate, and it's also called tapas, vangmaya tapas, that chanting shrutis and all in the morning. Evakaraha prag visheshana sammuchaya avadharane vakhyatavyaha. So that eva is mentioning, cha eva swadhyaya abhyasanam cha eva vangmayam tapa uchyate. What is by cha eva? Then he's saying take that seriously. This is also called, and it sort of mentioned that in addition to the 4, which is mentioned at the top, you also have to pay some attention if you want to do Vangmaya Tapa in a very comprehensive manner. Then there should be some time left for this Swadhyaya and Abhyasa. That's how we have finished the Vachika Tapasya. Then we'll go to look at what is the Manasika Tapasya. Okay, the mental discipline, self-restraint, or temperance, or whatever you call it. Manaha prasada somyatvam maunam atma binigraha bhava samsuddhirityetat tapo manasamuchyate. It's very straightforward, interesting as well. So, what are the things he's mentioning here? Manaha prasadaha. So, you should be all the time prasanna, having a joyful attitude mentally, not agonizing, whining over something, not all the time feeling bad, this place is toxic, and complaining about others, not organizing our thoughts around finding faults with others, not allowing our mind to dabble too much in negativities, and being happy and joyful. That is also one kind of tapasya, that is a sadhana. Soumyatvam, and having some bit of a peace of mind and a balance and equanimity. One should all the time read that book, Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. Monam, and monam can be some mental, not indulging too much of thoughts, but some people saying analytical meditation, analyzing, trying to reach right conclusions. Atma binigraha. So you're sort of at the end of it, you are sort of trying to dedicate yourself. That is equally important. Without Atma binigraha, so you do nididhyasana, but at the end of this, you have this particular thing that sarva vritti nigraha. So you have a lot of thoughts all in that, and you are to do finally that nirvikalpaka samadhi. You want to settle in a state where you are not allowing any kind of chitta vrittis. So that atma vinigraha, you're controlling your mind to perfection. Bhava samsuddhi ityetat, and then sort of that ultimate thing that you are reaching. Okay, so that particular thing, that bhava samsuddhi, he's saying bhavasya hridayasya suddhi, will go there. He's saying that through purifying your consciousness in your heart, and you're reaching that ultimate level of thoughtless awareness, where there are no vikaras, there are no temptations, there are no what do you call it, no negative or positive vibrations. You are in a perfect state of peace. These are manasa tapas. That is what he's saying. Let's look at how he explains each and every word of it. Manasaha prasadha. So, what is this manasa prasadha? Swachhata. Having that transparency in your thoughts, not being too complicated. Sometimes we are not aware of what's going on in our mind. And that's one of the reasons we say things, we draw conclusions, which surprise us at a later point of time. We ask ourselves, why did I at all think like that? Why did I trust this person? Why did I take that decision? But you took that at that moment of rationality, that moment of your vivek or discrimination. But then you don't agree with now. Maybe it's quite possible that you are not present 100% there, or you couldn't see yourself. It happens with us. We are not aware of our inner self. So our mental thing, the self which is kind of intoxicated with a few temporary thoughts, like you are with friends in a party and you think in a particular way. You are in an office and you think in a particular way. But when you are with yourself, you have more transparency, you take a very right decision. That's why I'm saying swachhata. Vishaya chinta vyakulatva rahityam. You are not super anxious, thinking about, I want to have this car, I want to have this, I want to do that project, because in that moment of restlessness, you take a lot of decisions. We take a lot of decisions which we do not love to remember much later, because we take, in fact, a lot of snap judgments, a lot of wrong decisions. So it's always better that if somebody is, I mean, this was a point of advice which was given to me when I was a student. I remember I used to agree with people, and he said, look here, you seem to be repenting what you agree with. So why don't you do one thing? Whenever next time anybody comes to you and says, let's do this or that, why don't you tell him, I'll let you know? And then you just quietly think about it when you're alone in your room. You don't have to say, we are going for a film. Are you going? Why do you say yes or no? You just say, okay, I'll let you know. I'll let you know by 4 o'clock. You still have 2 hours. So maybe by that time your mind is very cool, and you ask yourself, and the mind says, no, you're not going to go. Or maybe it says, yes, it's a very good movie, so let's go. I mean, it's up to you, but you shouldn't try to take a decision at a particular moment, because you're clouded with thoughts. It's quite possible that you don't take the right decision. Then somyatvam, so manasam. So you're having that good-hearted attitude. Sarvaloka haiti sitvam. So you are trying to think that you have that sarvatmaka bhava. You are a sarvaloka hiteshi. You want to help everyone. You're thinking good about everybody. What they call positive psychology. Pratisiddha achintanam cha. And then you are not thinking about what is prohibited, wrong things. You are not harboring in your mind stupid things like I want to do this or that, which might put somebody in problem, or you are not trying to attract or push somebody over or misbehave with anyone because of the kind of movements your mind is experiencing as a result of some faulty thoughts. I read a beautiful book of, by a Buddhist meditator. He said the critical thing that we teach people is how to be very skillful with our thoughts. That's very important. We have thoughts, but how do we deal with them? Because they are emerging in our minds, and they are like our children, they are like our products. These thoughts have emerged in us. We are the master. How do we deal with them? So he's saying somanasam, like having good things, positive mindset. Maunam, Muni Bhava, Mananat Muni. So that Maunam means that particular thing, the thoughtfulness of a particular Muni. That means a guy who is meditative. Ekagrataya, Atmachintanam Nididhyasanakyam. So he's saying Nididhyasanam. And but Nididhyasana is a very higher state, and therefore certain other people, Anandagiri and others, are saying essentially Stravana Manana. That is the much easily achievable target, that you read something, you are meditating on it. What is the meaning of this particular verse in Bhagavad Gita? You spend 10 minutes. Some people say, why are you wasting time? But that's not wastage of time. Wastage of time is not being able to actually think about what we have studied, which are interesting things. Then Vak Sanyama Hetu Mana Sanyomo Maunam iti Bhasyam. Sankaracharya has explained what is Maunam. What enables us to be measured in what we say. Sankaracharya has a beautiful solution. He's saying when we are able to practice silence in our minds, then we can be very measured in what we say. If we are all over the place in our mind, thinking about too many things, it's quite possible that when we speak, we are not measured. So we might say things we regret later. Therefore, he's saying it's a very beautiful thing. Vak Sanyama Hetu Mana Sanyama. That which is actually an enabling factor to help you be very measured when you speak. And that the causal thing is actually in your mind. How restrained you are with your thoughts. And if your mind learns how to deal with the art of thinking, it learns the art of thinking, then obviously it becomes very, very intelligent. You become very, very intelligent. We become very, very intelligent when we try to communicate. We are much more definite. We speak less, but we convey more. And that's very thoughtful communication. Of course, if you're a professor, you have to speak a lot. You're doing a training program, you have to reach out to people who do not understand what you are saying. Now, Atma Binigraha, what is that? Atmano Manaso Visheshana Sarva Vritti Nigraha. That you are trying to complete your mind, completely hold your thoughts. That you remember that Savitarka, Nirvitarka, Savichara, Nirvichara, then Sananda, then Sasmita. You remember all that? The 4 levels we had done when we were dealing with the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, in the light of a lot of cross references to the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. When you go to the ultimate Sasmita, and then you have Ritamvara Prajna, and then Dharmamegha Samadhi, and ultimately what do you have? You have that Nirudha Samadhi, where nothing remains except for the consciousness. And that self-consciousness, that I am meditating, that also vanishes. There is just pure light of the consciousness. So he's saying that Nirodha Samadhi, Asampragyataha, he makes it that Nirodha Samadhi, that ultimate thing, Atma Vinigraha. Atma here is mind. And completely you are achieving a moment of cessation, ultimately removing all thoughts, all movements there. Bhavasya means the Bhava Samsuddhi. Bhava here is Hridaya. Bhavasya Hridayasya Suddhihi. And what is Bhava Samsuddhi? He's explaining. Kama Krodha Lobhadi Malanibritihi. So, how do you purify your very presence? It's a beautiful word, isn't it? If we are able to remove the cravings and the desires which are hiding in us, and then anger and greed, we remove all that from our hearts. Isn't it full of love? Isn't it full of auspicious feelings? We are almost trying to be a clone of Bhagavan, God itself, isn't it? Then, therefore, that is saying that Bhava Samsuddhi. Punar Suddhi Utpadarahityena Samyaktvena Visishta Sa Bhava Suddhi. And then that Bhava Suddhi should not be a cause for creating a Suddhi in future. Punar Asuddhi Utpada Rahityena. Now, if you're temporarily being peaceful or trying to play act as if you're a very loving and a very kind and a very affectionate person, fine, that also you can do it. If you're doing it with bad intentions, tamasik. If you're doing it anticipating some good results, that is rajasic. If you're doing it for the heck of it, to win over God, of course it is sattvic. So that bhava samsuddhi is mentioning. Samyaktvena visishta sa bhava suddhi is bhava samsuddhi. Paraihi saha vyavahara kale maya rahityam sa iti bhasyam. What is that bhava samsuddhi? He is saying when this guide, or the spiritual guide, or this sadhaka is talking or conversing with others, he is not behaving like a mayavi. He is not trying to be manipulative. That is bhava samsuddhi. That means you are in a good sattva bhava. You are in a very honest, straightforward, loving, compassionate, without trying to cheat or mislead anyone. That is what is bhava samsuddhi. Iti etad eva prakaram tapo manasam uchyate. That is what is manasika tapas. Now let's look at these three. These are very small verses. We have 5 minutes, but I think we can finish these three verses. There's nothing much in it. So first we'll do with sattvika tapas, then we'll deal with rajasika tapas, and then we'll deal with tamasika tapas. So we will do one by one very quickly. It's very straightforward. I have already explained when we do it without anticipating any results, any returns for purifying ourselves. Sattvic tapas. We are doing it for because we expect some returns, some punyas. We want to show off, or you want to get some punya for next life or this life. Rajasic. You want to have this tapasya because you want to hurt somebody. Tamasic. So look at this focus. Shraddhaya paraya taptam tapas tapas tatrita trividham naraihi afalakankibhiriyuktaihi satvikam parishakshate shraddhaya paraya taptam. Okay. So paraya means you are having an extreme level of high level of subtlety. And shraddha, that is para shraddha you are having. You have ultimate shraddha, great amount of respect for what you're doing, complete dedication, not any sanka, not any doubts, not any questions, no virodha, no internal resistance. That kind of shraddha, if you have taptam, when you are doing that tapasya, tapah trividham naraihi. So these kind of, so taking into account this shraddha and the level of dedication and other things, we could divide into three parts. And what is the sattvika? Afalakankhivihi yuktehi. Those who are yoganishta and they have no craving for any results. They're doing it just to purify themselves. Satvikam parishakshate. So they are called the sattvika tapas. Tat purvoktam trividam sariram vachikam manasam cha. So the three types of tapas that we discussed. Cha tapaha shraddhaya astika vidya paraya prakristaya. If that is observed with a great amount of dedication, astika vidya, full faith, okay, paraya, prakristaya, with a high level of dedication, high level of attention. Pramanya sanka, kalanka sunyaya. What is paraya? That means you don't have any doubts, no hesitations, no resistance. Phalavisandhi sunyehi uktehi. And that fellow doesn't have any craving for results, and he's a yogi. Yuktehi. He's a yukta, yoga yukta. So he's not one of the guys who are just doing it for a while. He has been doing spiritual sadhana. Samahitehi yuktehi means he is meditative. He has resolved his temptations in his mind, and all that we have studied in chapter 6 and later on. So he's just Stita Pragya, he's Samahita. Siddha Siddhyo Nirvikarihi, and whether he's going to succeed or fail, he's not bothered. Why? Because he doesn't want a certificate. Okay? Adhikari Vihi, and who is the highest Adhikari? Because he's looking for Atmagyana. He's not looking for any material benefits. Adhikarihi Taptam. Taptam means Anushtitam. Because it's tapasya. So this Taptam means that is Anushtitam. Satvikam. Taptam Tapaha Satvikam Parishakshyati Sistaha. The great learned people call it Satvika Tapasya. So it's a tall order, isn't it? That we have to actually fulfill so many conditionalities that we read right now. So you will do the Saririka, Manasika, and Vachika tapas without anticipating any positive or negative results. Vishwar Arapana Buddhya, and then you are in a higher level of Samahita, Sita Pragya Sthiti. You are there all the time with a great internal spiritual resolution. Then Rajasika. Satkaramana pujartham tapodambhena chaiva yat kriyate tat iha proktam rajasam chalamadhruvam. Satkara. So, very good behavior. Mana pujartham, and you respect and you tapas. However, you are doing this tapas, vachika, manasika, and saradika. Why are you doing it? Dambhena cha eva yat. You're doing it because you want to show off. You want to establish yourself as a great tapasvi. Kriyate tad iha proktam. And if you're doing it with that kind of a thing, this is rajasika. And what is the result? It's very passing in nature. Chalam. It's not chiram. It's chalam. It will be here for a while. It will go away. And then adhrubam. It's not very certain. Sometimes you might get good results. Sometimes you may not get good results. Bhagavan gives very good results without asking when we do sattvika tapas. Do rajasika tapas? He will make a lot of calculation. The supercomputer will get into work. He'll look at your purva papa punya. Have you harmed somebody? What kind of person? There are a lot of factors that are taken into consideration. And then the result sheet comes out. Sometimes you benefit, sometimes you don't. Satkaraha, sadhu ayam, tapasvi brahmanaha, that kind of words. Some people flutter, speak very sweet words about you. Satkaraha, that is kind of satkara, they speak nice things about you. This guy is very great, he's very helpful and this and that. You see that in a lot of parties. When you're a powerful guy, there'll be 5 guys to flutter you. Ityevam avivekibhihi. And these guys are not great vivekis. They're rajasic people. They have their discrimination, but they don't have that sattvika viveka. They are not interested in antakarana suddhi, kriyamana stutihi. So they do this kind of praise, adulation, applause. They applaud you. Manaha pratyuthana avivadanadihi. What is that manaha? So when you enter, if it's an Indian condition, they stand up and say, hello sir, how are you? And avivadana. How have you been? We haven't met you for so long. Puja pada prakhyarana archana dhanadhanadihi. So, very cultural thing is mentioning puja means essentially like people used to give them a pot of water to wash their feet because he must have walked a long distance, and then give them a towel to dry his face, and then give some dakshina. He has come a long way. Tadartham dambhena eva cha kevalam dharma dhvajittvena cha eva cha na sattvika buddhya yat tapaha kriyate tad rajasam proktam sistehi. And this person is doing it to show off because he's very well off, he's very powerful. He wants to, sort of cast his spell on all these people who are well educated or, saintly people. They might do a big donation to a charity and then put it on a Facebook or Instagram. I'm working with the poor, and they donate a little, but they take a lot of pictures so that they can post it everywhere. So these are rajasika tapas. Iha asmin eva loke phaladam na paralokikam. You might get a little result, but only in this life, nothing in next life. Number 2, chalam atyanta alpakala sthai phalam. This phala that you get out of this rajasika tapasya, you will get some phala, but it is very temporary, it's transient, it's passing in nature. Adhrubam, phala janagata, niyama sunyatam. Phala janagata is there, you'll get some results, but there's no certainty about it. Then we'll deal with the moodhas. We have 2 more minutes. I have crossed the time limit by 2 minutes. Just 1 more minute. Moodhagrahenatmano yat pidaya kriyate tapah parasyo sadhanartham va tattamasam idahritam. Moodhagrahena duragrahena. You have bad intentions. You are nurturing bad intentions in you. Atmana yat pidaya. Then you're hurting yourself. You're doing a lot of hard tapasya. And same way as we discussed that earlier, some people do a lot of very hard spiritual practices. Kriyati tapaha, they do this. And why they don't do like the tantrikas and others? Parasya ussana danartham. Because they want to hurt somebody, you want to uproot somebody. Somebody is very well off, you want to give him poverty, and somebody's marriage is fixed, you want to plan to spoil that marriage or hurt somebody, all these thoughts. Vattat tamasam, these are tamasic tapasyas. We have crossed the time. I'll just stop here, and the little commentary which is there, we'll do it tomorrow and carry it forward. So, any questions? Otherwise, you will do the Santi mantras. I'm putting an end to the YouTube. Thanks for listening.